All right, so a couple things to go over. First of all, this is not a tiled meeting. Please govern yourselves accordingly. These sessions are being recorded. I have hit the record button. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. Use the chat feature if you want to submit any questions during the presentation. Otherwise, at the end, we will go through the chat questions, and we will also open it up for viewers to speak. There will be a poll at the end of the presentation. Please take the time to fill that out. We're using it for monitoring, all the polls that we're doing on these presentations to help come up with good content. The upcoming schedule. So starting next week, we are moving to a Wednesday only webinar session. So there won't be any more Tuesdays and Thursdays. They will only be at Wednesday on 7 o'clock. So we have When in Lodge Assemble, Lodge Decorum, Intro to Masonry Education Program, Freemasons at Gettysburg, Grand View Advice from Early Adopters, and Art of Delegation. Those are the upcoming ones. And of course, there's a link to where you can register for those. Another thing I want to point out, and I don't know if Brad's going to be touching on this as well, the Show and Tell Challenge. So there has been a Show and Tell Challenge, which is sponsored by the membership, leadership, and mentorship committees. Basically submitting video content, essays, poetry, art, etc. on the 3 questions. What is Freemasonry in Minnesota? What will your life and legacy say about Freemasonry? And how will you help others find their way to the rewards of the craft? There is a link on the bottom of this slide. There's also the link you can find in the eMason and on the Grand Lodge website. And now the feature presentation with Worshipful Brother Brad Phelps, Fundraising Beyond the Pancake Breakfast.
Thank you, brother. So I will begin screen sharing. Okay, so it is my distinct pleasure to talk with everyone tonight about fundraising, and it was suggested to me that the talk be titled Fundraising Beyond the Pancake Breakfast. An esoteric conversation to be sure, but the one mystery that we should dive into is why anyone would think I have anything against pancakes. The truth is, I actually really do enjoy them, and I've seen many Masonic lodges make good fundraisers out of pancake breakfasts. Now that said, I understand that there might be people on the call looking to expand their journey or look down other avenues. But before we go down those paths, there are some things to consider. We have to be aware of local and state laws, as well as rules and regulations from the Grand Lodge. So consider that when you're setting up your committees. And if I might, a suggestion, district representatives are an excellent resource when you're thinking about your fundraising activities. So I've been through a lot of different talks in my years, and sometimes I find myself wondering if the talk will ever end. If you find yourself in that situation, I have constructed a presentation of only 3 questions and about 15 slides. So if you're bored, you'll know about how long you'll be bored for, and hopefully you're not in that situation. Before I get into those questions, though, I brought this along to ponder. So here are 7 companies that have been successful over their time. And the thing to consider is, do they all have the same product? And obviously the answer to that is no. And yet they've been successful. So in the chat window, I'll give people just a couple of seconds. Chat, why you think these folks are successful in what they do. Okay. See if we get a couple more. Okay. I like all these answers. These are all good ones. I would propose to you, though, the reason they began to be successful in the beginning is along the lines of the value proposition, but also because they had something that they were passionate about and became good at it. And so the same is true with regard to fundraisers in the Masonic bodies. There's no silver bullet with regard to how we execute on fundraisers, and they're all very individualistic to lodges. And while they don't all have the same products, 3 of the founders of these companies are the product of our fraternity. So Brother Harlan Sanders, Brother Henry Ford, and Brother Dave Thomas. So along those lines, the first question you should ask yourself is, what do you enjoy? We as Masons enjoy a tremendous amount of things above and beyond our business meetings. Some of us are really interested in history and reenactment. Others are interested in motorcycles, cuisine, crafts, the theatrical, games. And these things help us to contribute some of the longer run goals, things like philanthropy, and what are the things that enable us to help support our causes, like the Reading Center for the Scottish Rite, or the Shriners Hospital for Children, or being able to buy bikes for children that make goals on reading books. And it's these types of activities and things that we enjoy that can lead to brainstorming activities. And while we're brainstorming, it's a good idea to start thinking about what are some potentials for fundraising. The ideal situation would be finding ways to leverage the things that we enjoy and the things that we're passionate about in order to find ways to raise monies. Now, you might have come into this talk hoping to see a list like this that we would deep dive in and kind of refine, but that's really not the purpose of this talk. Instead, it's my hope that we can come away from this with some tools that will help us to create lists like this and to actually execute on them. So this presentation is a bit more about teaming than it is to deep dive on fundraising ideas. When you're brainstorming, you're likely to run into somebody like this. But we did it, and that didn't work. Now, devil's advocates are very valuable, and you should receive their feedback and give it consideration. But you shouldn't let it monopolize your conversation, because we all must remember that things change. First of all, time changes things. Just look at what has happened to us over the past few months with the COVID pandemic. If we were to go back in a time machine to a year ago from now and ask the question, do we think it's possible that a good portion of our population would be working from home in a year from now? Our answer would probably be no. If we were to ask the question, do we think that not only would it be acceptable but encouraged to wear a mask when going into a bank to conduct business, we'd think we were crazy. But that's the thing, time changes things. And that includes people. Time will change people. If you look at who I was 20 years ago and my passions, it's very different than the passions I have today as a father, a husband, and the many other roles that I carry out. And additionally, with committees, it's unlikely that the dynamics of the people involved are going to be exactly the same. And so switching out a single person is likely to change dynamics on anything that's involving teaming. So as a follow-up question, what are you willing to get good at? And you'll notice I didn't ask, what are you good at? I asked, what are you willing to be good at? We have to be somewhat practical and say, what can we do? You know, if we had a fundraiser where I wanted to be Superman, it's hard for me to do that. There might be ways for me to fly, but it's not going to involve a cape or any specific superpowers. But I am willing to learn how to fly a small plane. And so you might have a lodge full of people that are very mechanically minded, and it's good. They can potentially consider doing a fundraiser that involves some sort of build. You might have a lodge that's full of cooks, and that's good too. They could consider a fundraiser that has to do with cooking food or serving food. But what's truly great is a lodge that's full of learners, people that are passionate about the process of learning and use that skill in order to find opportunity. When we're doing that, we want to think big and start small. So one of my heroes, Dr. Stephen Covey, the writer of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talks about all things existing in two realities. The first reality being the idea, or the architecture, if you will. The second reality being its realization, or a solution. As we're thinking about ideas, we want to be free enough to think big. Many people even go as far as having 5+ year plans. But as we execute on those things, we have to break them down into smaller, more manageable pieces and be willing to do work and fail fast and often. That seems kind of counterintuitive, but you have to ask yourself, is it better to invest a couple of weeks of time to see how things are going and adjust after a couple of weeks? Or is it better to invest 6 months of time into something only to find out that it wasn't very effective? This is basically leveraging the idea of the scientific method and seeing what works, what doesn't, make adjustments, keeping in mind our bigger plans, but being willing to learn and adjust as we go. You want to be able to assess who and what is available to you, which takes us to our second question: who will help? Chances are good that you can't do this alone. That's actually probably too soft of a statement. You won't be able to do it alone. Too often I see a single individual saddled with the responsibility, or sometimes you'll get somebody who just wants to take control and do everything because it's easier. But the reality is this isn't sustainable. On the one hand, they might get burnt out. And on the second hand, a new shiny object may be put in front of them that they're more interested in. Whatever the case, the rest of the team is going to be left wondering how to continue, if they're even able to continue at all. So you really want to make sure that you have teamwork. In my regular job, software developers that practice really good engineering skills do what's called pairing, which means we don't make any changes into production code unless we're doing it in pairs. And this has value for two reasons. One is we all know that two heads are better than one, but there's also quality assurance that's baked in as well. This is a practice that's been utilized for generations. If you look at the scribes of the Middle Ages, they used this type of practice when they were transcribing famous books of work. Additionally, you see this in accounting as we do dual accounting to ensure that our work is correct. So as we're putting together our teams and thinking about who will help, we have to ask, what does everyone need to know? And that involves level setting. What is the definition of success? What is our elevator pitch for what it is we're trying to do for a fundraiser? You also want to ask, what strengths do people have? But I want to caution everyone, because too often this becomes, what does somebody do for a living? So as an example, if you have a project that requires software and you have somebody that is a very talented software engineer, you have to consider that they might work 40, 50, 60+ hours a week doing that at their day job. And they might not be wanting to connect into the fraternity just to do the same things they do at work. They might be looking to expand their horizons, learn new skill sets, relax. And so it's not enough just to find somebody that's an expert in something. They have to also be passionate and want to help in that capacity. The last one is probably the hardest because it takes an investment of time. And that is, the team has to develop a good relationship. It's really, really important that as you're starting to set up a fundraiser, that you can be very transparent and frank with one another and ask hard questions like, is there anything that's keeping the team up at night? So as an example, if somebody has an idea for a fundraiser that's capital is equivalent to 70% of a yearly operating budget for a lodge, a risk-adverse person may be really uneasy about that, where somebody that's a bit more cavalier wouldn't think twice about it. It's important to get that out and to have a conversation so that we can see if there is another way, another path that nobody else has thought about that's better than the original thoughts. And at the very least, we want to make sure that nobody harbors any resentment as we try to go in and go into execution. The next question is, who is your target market? Is there interest? In order to find this out, we have to have some conversations. So as an example, you're probably not going to find a tremendous amount of interest for an ice cream social in the dead of winter in Minnesota. Additionally, you might not do so well having a booth serving barbecue sandwiches at a convention that's largely vegan. So you have to get an understanding if the ideas that you're thinking about actually have an audience. And once you've established that, you have to think about how you're going to get the word out. And you'll want to use as many channels of communication as possible, because in this day and age, there's a tremendous amount of them in use. Considering things like email, social media, television, and publications, yes, people still do read the newspaper and newsletters and local magazines. And the great thing is, a lot of these things have low cost for entry, sometimes no cost, depending on the type of event. Once you've selected your channels, I use a basic framework for cadence of communications. Months prior to the event, you want to have enough worked out that you can have an announcement. And you can use things like email, social media. I like Facebook events because you can begin to gauge interest as you move along. Repeatedly until the event, you want to travel, go to different lodges, go to different organizations, socialize and evangelize the event. We all have to remember that as human beings, hearing something once is not enough to remember it. Oftentimes we need to hear it several times before it registers. And then 1 week before, send a reminder. Now you can use email and you can use social media, but it's better to do it as a phone call or in person. And the reason for that is because it is much easier to ignore a social media post or an email than it is to ignore another human being. The day of the event, you want to capture it, put it up on social media for people to see, put it up on television for people to see. The reason for that is really twofold. One is you might have some people that honestly forgot about it and see it in time to still participate. But the second one is an investment in the future. See, there might be people that made the decision not to go because they didn't think there would be value. But seeing what's going on and the value that's been brought forward might convince them to attend the next time. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about organizational communication committees. They are really good at helping promote your events. And at the Grand Lodge, we have a committee for communications as well. They have a publication that's electronic called the eMason that's published on the last Wednesday of every month. They accept submissions up until the Friday before publication. There can be exceptions, but if you want to be guaranteed, you have to get it in before that Friday. You can contact them at emason@grandlodgeminnesota.org. And it's suggested that you put together a flyer with any relevant web links to include within the content. And finally, this almost feels like a theme of learning. You have to discuss what was learned. Make sure you congratulate each other. I recently attended a really excellent webinar talk where the power of thank you was discussed. My grandmother used to tell me that if somebody takes the time to do something nice for you, the least you can do is write a thank you note back. She encouraged it to be handwritten. It's really important that a team congratulates each other and celebrates their success. It's not easy to pull off any kind of initiative, especially in our volunteer time. While we're doing it, we have to discuss what worked and what did not. And I would really recommend writing these things down because over time, it's good to celebrate the things that continually work. And it's also good to consider trends of things that maybe didn't work so well. This is all data that can feed in and help us to consider improvements and implement updates. And while we're doing all this, we want to rinse and repeat. And the name of the game is continuous improvement. So at this point, I would like to go into a small session of something I like to call Let's Stump This Clown. Is there any questions?
Larry, your hand is up. I don't know if that was on purpose. Do you have a question? You may have froze.
There, okay, that helps. Yeah, I was just going to ask Brad what he sees as the best way to get started in a lodge, bringing guys together for gathering ideas for what we might be able to do.
Okay, great
And I
question.
didn't realize my hand was up, by the way. Sorry about that.
Great question. So, I am having some technical difficulties seeing my pointer, so I'm going to try to stop sharing for a moment. And I will be right back. Okay. So, that is a great question. Can you see my screen, Larry?
I think it's still blank.
I see a line with some colors above it. I'm
How
trying to
about
be okay, let me take a look. Same thing. I don't see a full screen.
Okay, we'll try this one more time, and if it doesn't work out, I'll just describe it.
Oh, there we go.
Awesome. So there's a tool that I love to use for brainstorming activities called a mind map. The basic way to use it is you might take a central topic like fundraising, and I would ask for people that I'm working with to just start giving me their ideas. And the basic guideline I use is I'm going to capture ideas, but let's not drill into the details of all the ideas. Typically when I'm doing this, I'll also project on a screen so that if I'm the one that's typing and maybe I'm not the best typist, somebody can correct me if I make a mistake. So, you know, somebody might say, let's do a haunted house. Another person might say, well, let's do a raffle. And another person might say pancake breakfast. So on. And you can build on this. and create your basic ideas. Then the very next thing I like to do, does everybody know those little circle garage sale stickers that you can use to put prices on your garage sale items? They're just little teeny circle stickers. You want to give the people that are participating 3 of those stickers and allow them, you know, if you print this out, to stack them on the ideas that they're passionate about. If somebody wants to, they can put all 3 of their votes on a singular item, or they can distribute it across multiples. And then based on that, you've got a prioritized list of brainstormed ideas, and you can begin refining and putting more details to the most popular that you have created. Does that help, Larry?
Possibly.
Okay.
Hey, I remembered to unmute. There you go.
One thing I noticed, our lodge went to basically not doing anything, to trying to start something up. Members, a lot of times, they have great ideas, you know, but nobody wants to take the lead on them. And basically what I told people is, because they kept coming to me with all these ideas and stuff, I'm like, great, you're the lead. Great, you're the lead, you know. Then finally, you know, someone actually took the reins on something, and we managed to do a fundraising. You know, you mentioned think big, start small. One of the biggest things I had a problem with, I wanted to do a 100-year building celebration. And one of the things I heard is, well, you're not going to bring in that many people. Not that many people are going to come, you know. And I kept telling them, I go, that's fine. We don't need to have 1,000 people show up. We just need something to start with, and then year after year we can build upon. And that was a great line. Think big, start small. You know, don't get overwhelmed with this huge grand idea. Start with something basic and add on to it, is what I think.
Yes, that's exactly right. So that's also where defining what success means is so important. You know, if somebody is expecting that we're going to suddenly bring in 100 people that have never been exposed to masonry and make them familiar, that may or may not be an achievable definition of success for the first year out. To what you said too, that sometimes it's hard to get people engaged. I've actually had a good conversation with folks about, well, if nobody really wants to put any work into this particular fundraiser, it's acceptable for us to pass a hat around the room too. And there's very little effort in that other than throwing some money into the hat. It's really engaging what people, again, are passionate about and are willing to do. And if you're just short on people, that's sometimes the way forward. The other thing I could offer is I am a huge believer in cross-lodge collaboration. So, you know, reaching out to other lodges to see if there are other people that are interested in a specific idea, and making a cross-lodge collaboration is a path to success as well.
We have a question from Steve. How are lodges managing Minnesota sales tax? Can anybody tackle that one?
I don't know the answer to that one.
Ooh, that's a good question.
We haven't done any fundraisers that would deal with the sales tax so far. Oh, donations are not normally taxable. I know one of the lodges.
You need to be careful. You need to be careful if you are having something of value that people are quote unquote donating for to receive a value. It may not be considered a donation in the state of Minnesota. I'm not sure. Sean Carrick could probably tell us more about that.
Well, I would just like to add in too, this is Shannon from leadership, that this is a great question. Reach out to your district rep or your right works for Brother Keith Ryerson, and he'll be able to supply you with the information you need for if you're selling a product that is for resale.
Cool. Thank you. And then another one I kind of rung a bell to me in your slideshow was on your communication of the events and the kind of schedule you had out. I just got a perfect example. During this COVID, our lodge decided to do a fundraiser for the food shelf, kind of a pass the hat type fundraiser. And well, we let it be known, 2 weeks in advance, this is going to be our deadline. Then we ended up extending the deadline. We had some like $600 raised or something. And then finally I said, okay, and got one more hour, and then I'm writing down all the paperwork and checks and stuff. And within 30 minutes, we had $1,400 raised. We had like $800 come in within 30 minutes, whereas like 3 weeks prior to that, we had like $600 raised. And then finally, that last 30 minutes, people were like, oh yeah, no, I want her to do that, because they all forgot. Yeah, that kind of reminded me of that.
Right on.
Hey, Brett, thanks for giving a really outstanding presentation, and just the whole process was quite insightful. I was wondering if you have some thoughts as to what are the Masonic boundaries in around a fundraising event. I mean, fundraising can go in any and all direction, right? So you can have strippers coming in and what have you more, and I'm not kind of promoting to do that, even though Justin is pointing his fingers up. But the point being, we are a Masonic organization, and there are certain boundaries, morals, ethics, and codex that we should stay within. And I was wondering if you would be willing to share some thoughts as to what these boundaries are.
Yeah, so the first thing I would refer to is the code. I suspected there might be some questions about, as an example, gambling, and there are some clear references in the code regarding that. It's why I actually had recommended involving the DR, because they can be a good resource to help with that. Additionally, it's just my style. That is, the lodges I work with are thinking about a specific idea for fundraising, to go out and start evangelizing it with people and see what they think about it as far as an idea. And that includes people that I'm connected with in the Grand Lodge. The last thing in the world that I would want in any of the lodges I'm involved with is to surprise anyone. And if there are other lodges that think they can be successful, I'm certainly not guarded in my ideas, and I welcome them to try to go out and help their particular lodge and the greater Grand Lodge of Minnesota by executing the same ideas. So to me, the key to your question is looking at the references that we have, namely the code, talking with the DRs, working with others, which might include the secretary of your lodge and the grand secretary as far as ideas, and communicating them and getting people's thoughts.
Yeah, Sean has a note here. The grand secretary is a good resource if the fundraiser might need a dispensation to occur. Yeah,
so the gambling piece is in the code. According to the code, if you're going to do anything with gambling, you need Grandmaster dispensation. Is if you're doing it in the Masonic building. So, good call out.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Brad. That was excellent.
Yay, yay, woo-woo.
I appreciate the opportunity, and I will hang back if anybody has any questions about show and tell or any additional questions about fundraising for a little while.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you to our out-of-state visitors as well. Thank you for joining.
Did we get the poll launched?
Oh, shoot. Thank you. Launching the poll. Please take time to fill this out. Thanks for reminding me. I forgot all about that.
Absolutely.
I guess I have to hit the launch button.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brad. I liked how you talked about the collaboration. I know that one thing that was really successful at our lodge was being able to establish a Ways and Means committee. So the senior deacon was given a responsibility in the lodge, and he met with the master and was invited into the officers' meetings to bring this content before the officers and say, I found this to have value. It's in line with the cultures of our lodge. I think we should pursue it. I saw these things weren't, still presented them, gave a reason as to why, and then it was still open, you know, if the master wanted to grab it or an officer saw some value to it. So it really gave us an opportunity to start collaborate and help identify or build a brand that was specific to our lodge.
Right on.
I think
Yep.
you kind of had on one of the last slides too, you mentioned, you know, keep records of what worked, what didn't work, and all that stuff is very important. I used to run run crews and project manager for a construction. And that's one of the things we did at the end of each day. Okay, what went right? What went wrong? How can we improve tomorrow so we can hit the ground running and not run into the same problems again? And that's something that, you know, we're trying to do on our lodge too, is keep records of this for future people who are going to take things over. And like you said, what works today or what doesn't work today may work tomorrow and vice versa, you know, too. So
Exactly right. Yep.
The one thing I'd caution people on, I've seen, you know, I've been in a lot of organizations, and I have seen some people during the course of keeping that record get a little bit negative. Say, you know, point back to the record when somebody says, hey, let's do this. There's somebody who'll bring up the old record and say, well, you can see we tried that, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Make sure you include why it didn't work or what you think may have caused the thing not to work as well. But don't be swayed entirely by the success or failure in the past.
Right on.
Today is today, not yesterday. And what didn't work yesterday may work just fine today. It's very important to keep a positive attitude. You know what they say, positive attitude is going to determine your altitude. And I kind of believe that. If you believe it'll work, it'll work. It may not work quite as highly as you thought it might. But what determines success or failure?
Right on.
That's a good question to know right up front.
So the spirit of the what didn't work might be something like, hey, we really could have used eggs. We'll use the pancake breakfast. We could have used eggs because people were asking for it. And then the second time around, oh shoot, we forgot the eggs, and we got the feedback again. And so those trends help us to understand where there might be some demand to make some improvements. And what you're describing with regard to it won't work because it didn't work at this last time, that's where I agree with you. We have to be careful because things do change.
There is another secret tool we can use in fundraising, brother, that I've actually asked for help with and seems to have sparked some interest, and that's your LEO.
Mm-hmm.
I asked my LEO to give a presentation asking the question, why would you not want to be involved in a lodge project to raise money? That's a good question to ask people, because if they can't answer that forthrightly, we can't really have an honest discussion. But if they can answer it forthrightly, it may be that we need to think about that. And no, I don't know about that. Justin, I think that'd be going beyond. So I've been called psych for various reasons, but not psyops. Thank you, though.
Plant the seed, Larry.
Hey, if I wasn't pushing 70, brother, I'd come after you. You'd never see me coming. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, shit.
Oh, well, you might see me coming at this size nowadays. Oh, well.
No,
If you do see me coming, I'll buy you a beer. How's that?
that is
No,
one thing you got to manage is the people who are always negative, and it's very easy to point out what's wrong. It's a lot harder to point out what's right, and kind of managing those people too. So someone comes up with an idea, like a brainstorming idea, it could be something completely off the wall, but morph into something reasonable. But if people just destroy that idea from the get-go, it'll never get that chance to morph into something reasonable.
How do you handle that, Michael, when that happens in your situation?
I handle it differently depending on the person. Different personalities, kind of lead to different techniques and stuff. But, for the most part, we just got to let people know that you don't want to, at the onset of things, it's like we want to throw out anything because, it can morph into something that will work. It could be completely off the wall, have a barbecue on the moon or something, something completely off the wall that all of a sudden people are like, that'll never work. But it can morph into something that would work. And letting people know that, we're not coming up with final ideas right now. We're just coming up with different ideas, and we can take a little bit from this idea, a little bit from that idea, and a little bit, and create something that will work.
I guess
think
the piece that I was going to add on that is when you did that brainstorming, I think the one good line you got to add to it is always, there are no bad ideas.
That's right.
And this is supposed to open this up so that we have some different perspectives from everybody. And one of the ways to do that is even kind of start it a little bit and think of some, not crazy, but just some off the wall, never used before ideas, and have those already on there. So if you've never done a picnic for a fundraiser, if you've never done a food fundraiser, have that on there so that it makes people think, all right, we got to think more than what we've done in the past. That's what he's looking for. And then I always add on, when we put these ideas up there, one of the next rules is no one can comment negative or positive on any of these ideas. So if I put up there that I want to do a pancake breakfast, no one can say, yeah, great idea. Nor can they say, no, I don't think so. Or just, wow, that's going to take a lot of people. Any of those comments can affect that voting later on. So you don't want any of that. And you want people just to open their minds. And that's the beauty of it.
Yep, exactly. That's great feedback.
Yeah, what I found really very insightful, Brad, was really quantifying the opportunity, meaning that if you go a little bit offline with your fundraising ideas, if you can substantiate it, that there is an opportunity, meaning there is a market, there is a prospective income, there is a reasonable feasibility of succeeding, that argument on itself gets a lot of naysayer or kind of at least in doubt, if not becoming supportive. So thanks for kind of articulating that.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
to
and
piggyback off of I was just going to piggyback off of Don Moy's point. One thing that I'll always cherish was shared to me from most worshipful Grandmaster Ed Helpus, was that a Master Mason should be a man with many ideas but owns none of them. I've always found great value in that. Bring something to the table, but don't be so caught up in it you're going to lose sight of the culture of the group or the energy or direction that it should go. So really something that our scholars or brothers in Masonry do a great job of is emulating our fraternity.
That's great. Yep. So there were a couple things that were mentioned that I think are good follow-ups as well. The word management was used, and I just want to make sure everybody understands that when we're gathering these ideas, the officers of the lodge need to be there as well. They shouldn't monopolize the conversations, obviously, but the master is a good person to be the facilitator, of course, and taking down some of the ideas that are being brought up by the brothers. It's really important from a relationship building perspective that when the time is right, people feel that they're heard. If there are some ideas that people had that weren't well voted on, it may be a good thing to consider giving them the opportunity to write a proposal so that more detail can be understood. It might be that people just didn't see the value because they didn't understand the detail. So these are all additional things that I might add based on people's wonderful feedback.
Oh, good points.
Well, Brother Brad, I'm going to have to get going here, so I'm going to take my leave, but excellent job.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Talk again.
All right.
Anybody else? I like these conversations at the end. You go ahead and stop the recording.